All right, this is social studies for May 7th and 8th, so it's for Thursday and Friday. We're going to be reading Knit Your Bit, which is about how women helped soldiers during the World War. And then we're going to answer some questions. All right, so follow along as we read this. Weather brought hardships to the soldiers of the First World War. The men needed more than the basic clothing they had been issued to endure winter in the trenches. Lucky for them, most of the girls back home knew how to knit. Knitters of all ages picked up their needles to make sweaters, hats, and scarves. Many on the home front who did not know how to knit learned. Knitters made custom items to send to the troops, such as mittens with a divided trigger finger. Even medical supplies could be knit. A long strip of knitting made a good stretchy bandage. Knitted eye patches held dressings in place. For those soldiers who had lost an arm or leg in battle, knitters made amputation socks. Seeing the need, the Red Cross began to arrange knitting campaigns. They also helped to provide knitters with yarn and patterns. Most of the patterns were simple, quick, and easy patterns allowed knitters of all skill levels to do their part and knit their bit for the boys at the front. Thousands of hours were given to create millions of pieces of clothing. One of the more difficult patterns was the one for socks. Novice knitters often found the turning of the heel to be a challenge, but clean socks played a vital role in good health of the soldiers. An infection called trench foot posed a constant danger in the cold, wet mud of the trenches. Fresh socks offered hope of avoiding an illness that could take a foot or a life. These hand-knit items inspired the soldiers. They reminded the men of mothers, sisters, and sweethearts, sending them love with each stitch. For those left on the home front, knitting brought a way to support the troops and be involved. Knitting never held so much passion or power. And up here, since we have a graphic source, a picture, the label says, Bundling Socks, War Chest Sock Appeal, Sydney, May 1917. Photographer G.A. Hills. So you can see a big group of women there sitting around knitting the things that the soldiers needed. And then down here, a wintry scene on the Western Front. And you can see a soldier there with some of his knit items on to help keep him warm. Because you have to think about back in this time during the First World War, they didn't have the clothing factories like we do now that produce mass clothing at a rapid rate. They usually made their own clothing, which took a long time, and a lot of the clothing they had wasn't as warm. So that's why they used the thick yarn to knit warmer pieces of clothing. Okay, so let's look at your questions. First one, why did women knit clothing for soldiers during World War I? Because they did not have any clothing while at war, so they asked women to knit. They wanted their clothing to be made only from yarn and wool. They paid women to make clothing and send them to the battlefield, or they did not have enough winter clothing, and the women wanted to help. According to the article, why were socks difficult for novice knitters? And novice, that just means beginner. So people that aren't very experienced in knitting. What made socks more difficult? Most socks are large and require a lot of yarn. A sock has a curve by the heel. A pair of socks can only be worn a few times, or knitters needed to use different patterns for right socks and left socks. So what did the passage say about that? Why was it hard for those novice or beginning knitters? What is the author's purpose for writing? To persuade readers to support soldiers. So they're trying to get us to support soldiers. To teach us how to knit. To entertain us with an amusing story from history. Or to inform readers of one way women helped the war effort during World War I. Okay. 4, you're going to circle 3 words that best describe the women knitters in the article. Patriotic, meaning they wanted to help their country. Curious, meaning they had a lot of questions. Dangerous, they did dangerous things. They put themselves at risk. Charitable, they did things without expecting to get paid for it. Hardworking, they worked hard. Or carefree, meaning they didn't have a care in the world, they just did what they wanted. So you're going to circle the 3 that best describe the women knitters. Okay, then we're going to look at the final sentence. Knitting never held so much passion or power. And you're going to explain how knitting became a passionate and powerful task during this time. Because generally knitting is just something people do to pass time. It's kind of like a hobby. They like to knit, to make things, but it's not really passionate or powerful task. So why was knitting a passionate and powerful task during the war, not just a hobby? All right, and that's it.